All right, we are back for another episode with another awesome guest, Jenn Gunsaullus. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm
My
excited to
pleasure.
have you. Yeah, so you got a PhD, you're doing all the things. You're an author, international speaker, sexologist, a sociologist, relationship coach. Literally, you have many hats in the ring, it sounds like.
I've been at this for a long time. So I
Yes.
started over 30 years ago, yeah, doing sexual health
Wow.
work. So yeah, and so it's been evolving over time, but this has been my passion and commitment for many decades.
Yeah. What I'm curious, just like what got you started? How did you know that this was it, you know?
It was actually back in college doing my undergraduate degree in Pennsylvania where I grew up, and my roommate became a sexual health peer educator where you go around to the dorms and do condom demonstrations and
Hmm.
safer sex talks and healthy relationships. And she was having fun in the group. And so I was like, oh my God, I totally want to join that club. And one of the motivations was that you get trained in public speaking, and I'd been terrified, to do presentations in classes. I would just be so nervous about it. And so I wanted those skills. And then I was like, and you get to talk about sex. Like, that's fun. Like, what's not cool about that? And so I joined the group about 31 years ago at this point. And then I became really fascinated about what we talk about with sex, what we don't talk about, the shame, the stigma, how fear-based approach to sex education don't really change behavior much and aren't empowering people. And then gender power dynamics about how we're raised differently by gender and how that impacts how we show up to sexual conversations and what we feel like we have a right to talk about or not, etc. So yeah, so I came into the topic because it was flashy and fun and to learn some public speaking skills. And then I stayed for just the intrigue of it, truly. And it never gets boring.
Mhm. Yeah, that is one thing I can also say. Like, I never have the same day in my business,
Yeah.
right? Like, I might be having similar conversations with clients, but
Yeah.
everybody's experience is different, right? Like, everybody has their own background, their own stories, their own childhood traumas,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had somebody in another field say to me, and they're like, "Yeah, don't you feel like you're just always saying the same things to people?" And I was like, "No." I'm like, they're the themes. Like, there's absolutely themes, but there's just so much nuance per person. And when you could show up and be organic in the moment with each person and let it flow and see and pull back the layers and feel into what's going on there. It's just each conversation is really unique in that way.
Mhm. Yeah, my hang up is always that I'm like, did I already share this book with you? Because or did I
I
already
know.
this podcast? Because I feel as
I
a
know.
a person myself, like a therapist myself and coach myself, I'm constantly absorbing. I want to learn all the new things,
Yes,
to books and the podcast and all the things, and that actually helps along with my work because I'm like, I was just listening to this other every day. I feel like it helps keep me fresh.
totally.
And then
Yes.
client to client to client. I'm like, did I tell you or was that the person before
I
you?
know. I do the same thing.
And you have a book. What is your book about?
It's From Madness to Mindfulness, Reinventing Sex for Women.
Ooh.
So, at the core of my work for 20 years now has been teaching people mindfulness skills and compassion skills to be able to be present with how if they're trying to talk about something sexual or they're trying to ask for their emotional needs and they struggle with that in some way or they avoid it, like what's going on, and
Mhm.
figuring out what's the story you're telling yourself, what are your emotions behind it, where do you feel those emotions inside of you,
Mhm.
and particularly heavy ones like shame and embarrassment and disappointment feel so icky inside of us, we want to just avoid those conversations in some way or use anger to push somebody away so that we don't
Mhm.
have to feel them. And so my book is teaching, particularly for women, teaching those skills to unpack all the madness that I talk about is these messages we learn growing up. If you were, you know, born and designated female and raised as a female, like this whole host of things that are imposed on you of how you should look and how you should act and what you should want. And then if you throw in religion and maybe more strict parental upbringing, it can create, such an environment that we don't know our bodies, we don't know our own pleasure, we don't know our desire, we don't feel like we have a right to know it or
Right.
ask for what we want. And then there's so much shame and stigma around it. But then we're supposed to be adults and get married and be the perfect wives and have these passionate sex lives. I was like, doesn't work that way. That's
Yeah.
madness. Like that's insane. And then so often, adult women, we think there's something wrong with us or that we're broken in some way, instead of being like, no, literally, this is how we were trained by society and what
Yeah.
we learned. And then, yeah, and then I teach the mindfulness skills and coaching skills, then how to bit by bit undo the learnings and then figure out who do you want to be and how do you want to be and how do you step into that future for yourself.
Yeah, which is, I mean, such a great segue into our conversation today. You know, the first half, we want to talk about setting boundaries around intimacy and consent and all of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, mindfulness, I feel like, is such a huge piece of that, right? So when you're thinking consent, having that mindfulness ability to check in with yourself and ask yourself, do I want this? Am I okay with this? Am I a yes
Yes.
to this? And if I'm not, how do I communicate that in a way that now I'm not fearing rejection, or I'm not fearing that defensiveness from a person, or anger,
Right.
or, you know, so many things. So yeah, I'll let you take over in that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and you already hit on like, 10 different important components of it, which is wonderful. But yeah, starting, when I start with mindfulness with folks, the key part is like studying ourselves and learning ourselves. Like what do we want? What don't we want? And that, especially when I'm working with younger women or women in their 20s, that's often what I'm working about. They're like, how do I know what I want? They
Mhm.
don't know because they have been steeped in social media, and sexual images and erotic images and pornography. And they're like, okay, I see what's out there, but like, how do I know what I want? And that's tough. So the starting place is learning to attune to ourselves and learning to attune, like, what are your emotions. Doing a daily mindfulness practice, even if it's only for 5 minutes of reflecting on some time in your day where you felt triggered in some way, or felt reactive in some way, and study of like, okay, what story was I telling myself? What were my beliefs around that? Review a list of emotions, pick out your emotions, and then literally tap into your body. Like, did I feel it in my throat? Did I feel it in my chest, my solar plexus, my gut? Did my shoulders get tense? Did I have a prickly, heavy feeling somewhere? Did I get warm? Like, check into all of that bodily wisdom. So that's how we, initially start training ourselves to check in. And then, if you're moving into a new sexual situation with someone else, it's like, well, how do I know if I want to do it if I've never done it before? I was like, exactly. So what to check into with there is then to keep checking in with yourself. Like, am I comfortable here? Do I feel safe? Do I feel like this person I'm doing this with is honoring me and listening to me? Like, that's what we're tuning to the other person and other people, and ideally choosing folks that honor us and respect us, and we're communicating back and forth openly with it. So that's where mindfulness comes in there. And then trusting our instinct. If something doesn't feel safe or right, stopping the situation. Or if you're with somebody that you don't feel like you could stop a situation, try not to move forward, like try to remove yourself from the situation or say, hey, this just isn't feeling right to me. So, and no, like, it really is trial and error. That is the only way. Like, it's okay to have a sexual experience that you consented to and you chose to do that you didn't love or that
Mhm.
wasn't great, but that's the only way we find out what we like, who we like, and what circumstances, or how we want to shift things to tap into our own pleasure and our own interests. So, and then, how do you do it gracefully and compassionately? Because it is a fellow human in front of you. And that matters. And that's something that I think that has been lost over the, past few decades in some of the consent education that's can be rather blunt. Like, one of the things I hear in a lot of consent education is like, no is a full sentence. Like, you don't have to explain yourself. And I love that concept. However, we are fellow human beings. If
Mhm.
you're doing something that's as intimate as being sexual with another human being and they just say no to you and that's it. Like, what? Like, wait, what? Huh? Wait, did I do something? Wait, what's going on? Like, so I'm like, I think we need a little more complexity, and it's hard. Like, I get it. So I like that you have the right to say no, and you don't have to explain yourself. But I do think you can still do that in a way that is compassionate, that there's a fellow human being in front of you who also has feelings and needs and wants, and
Mhm.
not to prioritize what they want to do in that moment over what you want to do. But you still can be kind to their needs and just state and be like, oh, hey, like, I love what we've been doing. I'm not feeling comfortable moving any further right now, or can we shift to something else? Or I'm feeling pushed right now. Can we pause for a moment?
Mhm.
And that takes a lot of courage to do. So I mean, I really do. I am a fan of actually like role playing and practicing saying
Mhm.
things like that out loud, even with a friend, and like feel the awkwardness of it.
Mhm.
Because it's those icky feelings inside that we're often afraid of. And so practice gaining comfort with discomfort around those icky feelings.
Yeah.
So, okay, there was a lot of
I'm
information.
glad. Well, and something that just is coming up these past couple of weeks with clients is, and so I want to ask your advice on this, like how to softly, like softly give the no, or right, softly set the boundary. So specifically in the realm of, I'm going to use a client example here, right? Like they have
Yeah.
a great weekend, they're out with friends, they're having such a good day, they're feeling connected, both of them emotionally connected. It's good.
Yeah.
He goes to initiate sex, but in her mind, he's a little past that limit of drinking, right? It's a little, maybe a little
Oof.
sloppy, or could get sloppy, right? And so she says, no, but it's like, I'm not trying to fight with you. I love you. I want to be with you, right? Like, well, I want to continue our good day, but for, sex right now is a no for me. So how in that realm, because this, especially
So
summer,
hard.
right? Like people are
Right.
having fun, we're on
Yeah.
vacation, right? So
Yeah.
anyways, like what would be your soft way?
Yeah. And that's hard because if anybody is intoxicated, we're not dealing with a rational person in front of us. And so often they might not think they're that drunk and they're not going to understand. So versus like if everybody's sober and you're having a normal conversation, you're like, hey, I'm feeling off, this isn't right, with like a long-term partner that you're with, or somebody you've been with for a while, they can be like, oh, okay. Like, they might be disappointed, but they're like, oh, okay, I understand. When somebody's drunk, they're like, I'm not drunk, or I'm not that drunk, or this is fine. So that is, and that will vary by the person and the amount that they drank and how their brain chemistry shifts with alcohol. So probably my best advice is to try to alter, like still, two things. One, honestly, remove yourself from the person, because what I'm afraid is if that they can get pushy, that they
Mhm.
can be pushy if they've been drinking and then they feel thwarted.
Mhm.
And then the thing is, likely they're going to feel like an ass in the morning, but I don't want you to have to go through that experience with them right now. Like it's not good for anybody. So if you can remove yourself from the situation, possibly, or go to a different bedroom or something, if that's a possibility. Or if you can divert the attention and just still like cuddle and still have some closeness,
Yep.
like so that there's still, and that and ideally, if you're still feeling connected to the person and you're just like, oh my god, I love you, we had such a great day, this feels like we drank too much, and maybe just take it on yourself. You're like, I don't feel good. Maybe that's a way of just saying, I don't feel good, but can we still connect? Can we still cuddle? Can we still be with each other? So if you're not worried about dealing with an irrational drunk person, the other approach, and the main approach I would always say in things like this, is still maintain connection, still do something that maintains connection, still be like cuddling with each other. You could still be touching each other. You could still be kissing. You could still be touching in some ways. So still engage with some physical and emotional intimacy and maintain that. But just, keep it from moving to intercourse.
Mhm.
So does
Mhm.
that help? Does
Yeah,
that?
yeah, the latter of that is exactly what I said. Like, how could, and that's what I gave the advice. Like, okay, if
Yeah.
sex is a no, what are you a yes for? And
Yeah.
yeah, maybe it's like, well, can we make out instead, right? Like, I'm up for that, or
Yeah.
I'm up for cuddling, or I'm up for taking a shower together, or whatever it is.
Yes.
But yeah, definitely, or maybe more non-sexual intimacy, like hand holding, or if they, for this couple, they had somewhere else to go, so their day was not over. They had, where this was like a midday, they had more things on the agenda. So I'm like,
Okay.
guys, that's a long,
A little sexual interlude in the middle.
yes, 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 yes.
That's
So,
awesome.
but yeah, no, I think that's yeah, great advice. I would say, again, in alignment too. So we've had conversations on the podcast before around setting boundaries, not
Mhm.
so much in the realm of sexuality, which is odd considering this is a sex podcast. But when you're talking through like boundaries around sexuality, what do you have on that? Give us some context around that.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything we've been talking about so far is like, for, boundaries are, well, so boundaries are a way of, in kind of in alignment with what you were just saying, but like boundaries are like, we tend to think of them as like restrictive or negative, but boundaries are like how you say yes to yourself by creating this place, this space that you can freely play in and
Mhm.
show up in and be present in, and not feel like you need to defend or deflect or be on guard all the time. Because ideally, the best sexual situations are when you relax into them, and then you get to really be organic and nuanced and explore with the other person and not feel on edge and not feel worried. And that's what boundaries create for us. So instead of being restrictions, they actually give us freedom. Now it's then the communication of the boundaries, because for someone else, they may be restricting what
Mhm.
they wanted or what they hoped for. So to me, it's a, it's having conversations about this, but and knowing that you have a right to own your boundaries and put them up. But again, you could still be compassionate to the other person in front of you and say, hey, here's where I'm feeling comfortable so that I can be fully comfortable and trust you and have fun in this, because I don't want to be on guard. And the thing is, when you communicate it like that, most people that you're going to be sexual with were like, well, of course I want you to be fun and have a, feel free and not have to like guard and deflect. But I don't think we often present it in such a direct way.
Mhm.
So, communicate in a way that you're a team together, and then ask the other person, like, what are your boundaries? What are your interests? What are you looking for? I mean, and what I'm saying right now requires a lot of trust and communication and safety. And often we need to know somebody better to be able to do that. And we're already doing sexual things with them.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So, I mean, and that's something to think about. If folks feel like they're having sexual interactions with somebody before they even have the comfort to have conversations like this, like maybe slow things down a bit till they do know that they trust that person. And then if you are in a longer term relationship, then sitting down and having a conversation, often in a not sexual situation,
Mhm.
and just be like, and dude, genuinely compliment your partner. Like, I love when we've been doing this and this was great. And the other night was so fun, and I've been realizing, like, I'm experiencing pain in these situations,
Mhm.
or, I'm having my period and sometimes I'm okay with it, but sometimes I don't want sex with my period, or my nipples are feeling really sensitive right now. So can I create some boundaries around this so that I'm not worried about getting hurt physically, and I could just relax and have fun in the moment. So, yeah, I mean, if I had to break it down to like the main components of it, I'd say it's one, knowing you have the right to
Mhm.
put up sexual boundaries. Two, getting clear on what they are for yourself so that you can have fun. And then three, like kindly communicating them with your partner. And then four, like checking in.
Mhm.
Where's your partner with it? What are their needs? What are their boundaries?
Yeah.
So,
And for the person on the receiving end of that, right? Like it's not a no to you, it's a no to the thing. And then
yeah.
setting ego aside. They're not saying no to you, they're saying no to the thing.
And that's a hard distinction for most people to make, especially because then they also feel disappointed. So they feel both rejected and disappointed. And so helping people reframe that is invaluable, because when people feel rejected and disappointed, we don't behave well often. Like, we kind of act like assholes sometimes, or people can get pushy, or they can start sulking,
Mhm.
or they can start ignoring their partner, and like none of that's good. So what I always hope for is that even when you're having these difficult conversations around sexual topics, or you're putting up boundaries, or you're saying no to certain things, that, like you said, it's like, you're still a yes to a lot of things, and like focus on what you are a yes for, and focus on the ways you shift what you're doing, but stay connected. The focus is always that you want to be having a fun, safe, engaged physical interaction with each other. It just shifts what it looks like. And I
Mhm.
think that's hard for a lot of people in our society, probably most societies, because we learned a very linear way of doing a sexual encounter, and that there's specific acts you do. And if you don't do those acts, then you're not happy or you're not fulfilled, or versus being able to be creative and think outside the box. And when I work with older couples and couples in like, really long-term marriages, relationships, I always say, I'm like, the number one thing to increase your likelihood of sexual intimacy into your 70s and 80s, if
Mhm.
you're still together, um, is your ability to communicate with each other as a team around sexual creativity and thinking outside the box, because our bodies change, our hormones change, erections change,
Yeah.
vaginas change, the whole thing. But if you can keep talking and working as a team together and being creative, you're like, okay, this isn't working anymore, but how can we still stay connected and have pleasure?
Yeah.
And And I wouldn't, as a society, I would say we are not good at that.
Right. Sex is
Um,
this way and this way only, and there's nothing.
right. And it should look like it looked like when you were 22, or like it looks like in Hollywood movies, which is not what's, lasting sustainable intimacy looks like in ever changing
Mhm.
bodies. So be creative. I mean, and to me, it's not like just giving in and giving up about aging. It's being realistic about what's going on and then getting creative with it.
Yeah. I like your creativity, and then curiosity is another word I'll
Yes.
often use.
Yes. Exactly.
And I think too, in creating the boundaries, right? That I think people underestimate how much, like, the safety piece of it, right? Like if I set a boundary and you stay within that boundary, like, now I feel safe, and maybe then that opens up more opportunity, or now I'm willing to explore more with you, or explore maybe this thing that you have curious or interest in. And I'm not,
Yes.
right, for men that are listening, or
Right.
anybody listening, right? I'm not saying, give her what she wants and that's gonna, she's gonna want more
Exactly.
after that. That is not what I'm saying here. However, safety is so, so important. And I think,
Yes.
again, it's underestimated. The emotional safety. Again, when people are safety, they're like, well, I don't hit her, I'm not verbally abusing her. No, it's
Right.
emotional safety. That's what the women, that's what everybody
That
wants.
yes, that I have the right to say what I want or don't want, and you, as the person who loves me the most, is gonna truly be mindful of that and remember that and honor that. And but yes, there's it's 2 things within that. When somebody does that for us, it often creates more desire,
Mhm.
because that is like that, like, when we can trust an intimate partner at that level, especially as women with men who are
Mhm.
often bigger than us or stronger than us,
Mhm.
that is frankly often quite arousing, and it induces desire when you feel that safe and that you can trust somebody that much, and then you can relax that much.
Mhm.
That can increase desire, and so in and of itself it's sort of a bit of an aphrodisiac.
Mhm.
And then to your point, I have talked to some men who are so good. They're kind of like players,
Mhm.
but they're like the most respectful players. So like every night they're out with a different woman, but they're not promising them anyone, and
Mhm.
they are so honoring to whoever that woman is, what her needs are, how she's wired, and the boundaries she puts up in. And it was like, I remember this was a while ago. I was talking to a male friend of mine. He goes, "Yeah, I'm just happy to be there. I don't want to do anything she doesn't want to do."
Yeah.
And so he's so good with boundaries that then the women feel so comfortable with him that they are then often wanting to explore more. Now you can't assume that, but that's because he genuinely is not pushing, and he goes, I don't want any more than what they
Mhm.
are comfortable with and want to give. And he goes, and I am so happy with what we have and what we're doing. And he's so genuine in it. Like,
Mhm.
he's not playing the game.
Yeah.
He's just really honoring. He's just happy to be getting some
Yeah.
with that woman. So, but right, you don't want to play that as a game, because that's really the opposite of compassion for a fellow human being.
Well, and how sexy too, right? Like, I set a boundary and then my partner says back to me, like, thank you for telling me, or what can I do to give you pleasure in a way that you want? And I hear in the couples I work with, right, at the end of the day, and again, I'm speaking more so in like heterosexual relationships, but at the end of the day, the man, he's not actually wanting to have sex with her when she's so disconnected. She's laying there, right? She's the quote unquote starfish or the dead fish or whatever,
Right.
right? No, he wants her to be connected, enjoying it, feeling desired, right? Like,
And
wanting
passionate. Yes,
specifically, yes.
exactly.
So it's like, okay, if you can withhold the boundaries, stay within the boundaries, like, hear what she's saying, give her creative freedom and whatnot, and for yourself
Yeah.
too. And I'm not saying like men to shut down what you want, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a nice dance when it people do this well.
And it's a shift in mindset. And it's not a mindset that we're taught of how to approach around sex, because it is almost like we have to take it, or it's scarcity perspective, or we've got to defend from it versus, yeah, let's flow together and let's put up these boundaries together and let's honor all of this. Like that true teamwork aspect. Yeah, and it could be tough when you're fitting in sex at the end of a long day with
Mhm.
family and kids and work, and you're exhausted and you're like, "Okay, let's just get this thing over with."
Yeah.
And versus be like, "Okay, what can we yes, let me see how I can show up here. Let's both get pleasure."
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, so that was first half. Like, and then the second half I wanted to talk with you about was this. So the concept of what I described as the mental load, but this, right, like this thing, this stuff that goes on in the background that's in our brains that are definitely playing a part in our ability to become turned on or want to engage in intimacy with our partners. And I forgot the phrase that you use. What do you
Well,
use?
it's funny. It's kind of two different directions we can go with this. There's
Yeah.
one that's like the mental load that could be just around like the mindfulness piece of just how we're always distracted,
Mhm.
especially in today's fraught technology world. And that could always be just sort of like running in the background and the chatter. So that can be an aspect of mental load. But then there also is the aspect of like the emotional labor that particularly for women is just in households, something that women are often doing more and often doing more of in workplaces. And it's this invisible labor that we're always sort of like trying to take care of others and make sure everybody's okay, because we care about people. We're remembering everybody's birthdays and the
Mhm.
wine we need to pick up to bring to the party and emailing the teachers and just this constant like mental, emotional labor behind the scenes, and that type of stuff often goes unrecognized but takes a lot of time and energy and can build resentments in relationships. So I'm not sure which direction you want to go.
That one,
Yeah.
that that
Yeah.
because this is
Yeah.
yeah, I do think for people that, I know the audience pretty well. I feel like that hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, and to me, this is as a sociologist and specializing in gender role socialization, this is one of the topics I like to bring up a lot when I'm working with a heterosexual couple in front of me um, because it's just something that so often, unless it's a particularly sensitive man who also has really good socio-emotional skills and is aware of doing stuff like that, many men don't realize all of the like these are the things that make the world nice, frankly. A lot of the emotional labor that keep things moving smoothly, that keep children like on time to summer camps
Mhm.
and keep fresh sheets on the bed or like nice like there's just this ongoing paying attention to all of these different components, the mental emotional components of what it is to live, to it's like all of the dressing around life, which maybe seems superficial, but if it wasn't there you'd notice
Mhm.
it and you'd be a whole lot less comfortable,
Yeah.
let alone your kids wouldn't be picked up on time. And I mean, in women in general, we're wired more this way, I think, because of hormones, but we're also then trained this way from birth to attune to people around us more and to be attuned to their emotions and their needs and to be trying to, excuse me, predict people's needs. So all of that means that there's just this constant, like, in the background. It's taking energy. It's taking brain energy to be paying attention to these things all the time and caring about these things and attuning to them. And so I think that's a adds to women's exhaustion,
Mhm.
um, more overall, especially if they're working outside the home, also and kids, but just overall, like it's invisible labor is what it is, and it's often not recognized as labor. And I think it can be easy as women in long-term heterosexual relationships to then feel resentful about that they're not being acknowledged for it.
Mhm. Yeah, acknowledged or like why isn't he thinking this, right? I hear that often from the female clients, like, why do I have to be the one that's right, like that does all this, that thinks like, yeah, we have the birthday
Right,
party, so we need to do X, Y, Z plus
right.
C for the birthday party, like to get prepared for this thing, right? And
Yeah, well, and there's something, I mean, often women are because you're the one remembering to do it, because you're the one who cares about it. And then the piece that I think is important to look at also is sometimes women don't feel like their husbands are doing it as well as they would.
yeah.
And so they don't want to then give up to the control because they're not going to be happy at they have a higher standard for how it's being done. So for me, like I think these are important conversations to have. If you are specifically building resentments around this in your relationship, or maybe you didn't know you have resentments, but you're listening to this podcast right now and you realize I do have resentments now. Not
Yeah.
that we're trying to stir anything up in your marriages or
Yeah.
relationships. But to me, this is a thing to do some journaling on, and actually, so write about it. Write down what you do. Write down why you do it, why it matters to you, but why you think it makes everybody's lives better around you, and why you think it's important. And then do like own your resentment, and then but be proactive. Be like, okay, what would I like differently? And then think through. You're like, are there some tasks that you would like to pass off and create a structure, an ongoing structure, then you pass off to your partner. Now you need to be clear because maybe what's obvious to you, the 4 steps that need to be done to do this thing, is not at all clear to them because
Mhm.
they haven't done this before. They've never thought about it. They don't even really care about it.
Right.
But so to me, and then give them space to mess up. But yeah, and then have reminder, notes sitting on the kitchen table or alarms going off. And then so yeah, give them some of that work to do, give them the skills to do it, and then give them time to learn it. And then hopefully over time, because we can't, if somebody doesn't care about the same things we care about as much and they're not aware of them, like we can't just make them have the level of awareness that we do. Like that's, unless they really, really, really want it and are working on it, which then it would be around mindfulness skills. But you can at least give them some of these tasks to do.
Mhm.
So at least it's something off of your list. And then you need to, let go of some of the control too. Cause I think sometimes for some of the women, they actually they resent it, but then they also don't want to give up the control. So that's for you to look at for yourself. Is that creating anxiety for you? And
Mhm.
that's a mindfulness practice. Where are you feeling that inside of you? Breathing into it and just say, okay, let's try things different for a month and let's see how this goes. And then assess, get together, have a 20-minute meeting with your partner at the end of the month and like talk through, but like be kind, if you're pointing fingers and coming in with the energy of resentment, you're more likely to get defensiveness or a partner that's like, I just don't care about this. If you care about it, you do it. So
Mhm.
you want to create the context that facilitates teamwork and
Mhm.
kindness.
Yeah, very well said. And I'm glad that you touched on the control piece too, because I think that that is a real key, myself included, right? Like this is something that I'm currently trying to work on, is releasing that control, right? If I'm asking for help and he is actually helping me, letting him actually help me, not coming through with the right. It's like he's wiping the counters and here I am double wiping the counters.
Right.
The visual of it, that's literally what I think it feels like. And I know that's what women do, or he does the dishes, right? And then she's redoing the dishes, loading it in her way. It's like,
Right.
just let that, let that go. Are the
Yeah.
dishes clean? Yeah, okay, move on.
Yeah.
Right. Because that can be so emasculating to the man, especially too. And it's like, here, I want to help, but she literally doesn't let me.
Yeah.
So
And that's, I mean, yeah, and that then further pushes us into our like stereotypical gender roles,
mhm.
instead of being like checking them. And I think it's interesting because often folks, if you have a high standard for cleaning, often like you look at your childhood and either you learned that high standard or you grew up in a household that had none of that. And
Mhm.
this was your way of feeling like you had control by being able to clean because you had control over something in your environment. So look at that because that means you're still running through a pattern, a reactive pattern based on uncomfortable childhood emotions or just something that got trained into you. So like you're an adult now, you get to reflect on these things and think about like what's worth it? What's worth your time, what's worth your energy, and what's worth friction in your marriage and where can you make some new, I mean, stick to your values and what in your integrity, but reflect on sometimes that's been programmed into us from someone else or from childhood and maybe not who we need to be as adults.
Yeah. Yeah, quit letting the dishes ruin your sex life.
Yeah, exactly. It's so true. I know, it is so funny how often, like, cleaning up the kitchen is,
Yeah,
like, connected to people's sex lives. I know.
wild, yeah. That is really wild.
Uh,
And there's just a resource on this, something that I share with clients. So, actually, a client was who shared the book with me. There's a book called Fair Play that is literally around this, the mental load, how generally it is the woman that's taking it on, and then for partners, like how to be able to better help. And then
mhm.
I realized on Amazon, there's a game for it. So it's all the cards, and it comes with all these cards of what could possibly need to be done in a household or with families.
Oh,
You sit across from each other and it's like, okay, I take this, I take, right, like right now in our everyday, I take on this, and then you get that visual and you see, okay, wow, generally
yes.
again, it is the woman that is
Yeah.
taking on And then he's like, oh shit, okay, well, peeking over, oh, I could do this, I could do this, right? Do you trust
That's
me to do
so
this? Am I allowed,
cool.
like that? So yeah,
That's awesome. Oh, I love knowing about that game out there and cards, or the book and the cards. That's awesome. Thank you. That's such a good resource.
for sure.
Good. Because I know I've helped over the years clients create like checklists like that or something like that. But often one of them just was like, I just like this is taking too much time. It didn't like there was it. And I was like, mm-hmm. And anything you don't want to shine a bright light on, there's usually a reason. Like, or some people do the same thing with finances. They're like, I don't want to have budget conversations. I was like, mm-hmm, because you're avoiding something, you know? So like I love something that's like it's right in front of you. Like they put the answers in front of you. So that's awesome. Nice.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this has been wonderful. I have really enjoyed our conversation. I feel like we
Likewise.
touched on so many things in a short amount of time. But so you work with people. Tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing currently.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've had, so I'm located in San Diego, California. I've had a private coaching practice doing relationship and intimacy coaching for at least 16 years now, working with, yeah, individuals and couples. And my real passion is public speaking. So
Mhm.
just like I said, I started that 31 years ago. So I get to travel around the United States and now internationally, and speak to groups and do couples retreats um, and do Valentine's events and small group forums and a lot around. I mean, certainly around all the topics we've been talking about sexual desire and mismatched desire levels. It's one of my specialty areas, but also even some things just taking away the specific sexual components and talking about vulnerability and authenticity and mindfulness and compassion and effective communication in any of our closest relationships. So not just our spouses and long-term partners, but with children's or with coworkers or with your board. And
Mhm.
so how do you cultivate emotional agility and emotional responsibility, and cultivate meaningful relationships really based on vulnerability and kindness, but also your authenticity and your boundaries for yourself. So and then I do, yeah, a lot of videos and writing on all of these topics. So
Awesome. Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to work with you, are you on social media? Do you prefer they go?
Yeah, I mean, my main website is drjensden.com. And then that links to, yeah, YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all TikTok. Actually, I might have not even have listed TikTok on my website yet, but I'm out there on TikTok,
Yeah.
just trying to do all the things. So it's all out there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Jen, so much for coming on today. This was, again, just, I think, a very refreshing conversation, something that hasn't been talked about on the podcast yet, which again, it's constant conversations I'm having with clients. So I can see this being a really good resource for people. So I appreciate you.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks for what you're doing here. I appreciate it too.
Absolutely. The world needs more us's.
That's for sure.